Green Bay hustle, grind it up. Hit the field, we don't bluff. Touchdown dances, feel the love. Jordan's got that MVP stuff. It's time for Aloha, let's go. Packers bringing that show. It's time for you know who. Wanna go, gonna glow.
Aloha and welcome back to another episode of the Ohana Packers Edition podcast, where Iowa Joe and I are previewing the NFC North leading Packers game as they head to Mile High to face the Broncos, the number one seed, ironically, in the AFC. I joked that in spirit we are facing the Bears 3 weeks in a row, where it's even though the Broncos are in the AFC, obviously, and all that kind of stuff, it's another team where they're on an inexplicable 10-game winning streak. The Bears had won 9 out of 10 when they faced the Packers. The Broncos have won 10 in a row. And you look in it, and the Broncos record it's kind of similar to the Bears, where there's a couple, like I said, inexplicable wins, i.e. their comeback against the Giants, where that game looked dead to rights until Jackson Dart got concussed late in that game. And then there was the Philly game where
They beat the
Philly,
Eagles, didn't
yeah, they beat the Eagles in a game where, I forgot those games were back to back to back for Denver. So they beat the Eagles on a game where the Eagles turned the ball over late. Denver goes up late, and that was did AJ Brown quit on the route? I think he did. Play. Then they needed a literal last second field goal to beat the Jets. Yes, those New York Jets. And then they needed to concuss Jackson Dart to beat the Giants. And so that was 3 games, the second, third, and fourth win in this win streak. And then they barely beat the Texans, and they beat the Texans, Raiders, and Chiefs by a combined 9 points. So, and each of those games was won by 3. And then they needed overtime to beat the Commanders, who honestly had that game on a walk-off 2-point conversion that just got, that luckily Denver was able to blow up. And then they played the Raiders again, who had one of the funniest in the history of sports backdoor covers, where they're kicking a field goal as the time expired to put it to a 7-point game. It was one of the most hilarious situations I've ever seen. That was like a college football, we're not losing by the spread, moment kind of thing.
That's when you put the tinfoil hat on, because they had to do it for Vegas.
And it was in Vegas, so even better. But you know, I bring all these things up to say that yes, just like I said going into the Bears game last week, you are what your record says you are at the time you play these teams. But there's a very similar feel to the Bears game where it's like, are they really that good? This Broncos defense is much more legit than anything the Bears brought to the table. I think it's a better top-down unit than just the Bears. Their run game is the number one run game in the league, and even that I think is a little artificially inflated by certain things. Whereas the Broncos defense is a legitimate unit. I do think that there's some areas the Packers can take advantage of them, but this one, you combine the fact that this defense is really good. The Packers O-line has found its footing, but needs to still prove itself. And the game is in Mile High. Those 3 factors, and that's where this game, it's either going to be a proving grounds for the Packers, or it could be, I don't think it'll be as bad as that 2015 game where Rodgers had 65 passing yards or whatever the shit it was, because I don't think Jordan is going to do the same dumb shit that Aaron has done. But at the same time, it has the feeling of a game like that where it's you can see it teeter on a thin line. But I know I've delved into a lot of what's at stake or what's on the table, but we'll go through our usual thing. But Joe, how are you feeling about this week as the Packers come off the big 3-game sweep of the NFC North and heading into an uncommon opponent, but a very important game nonetheless?
I had a lot of the same feelings that this really does feel like a Bears matchup, because on top of the points that you just had, that Throw in that they have a second-year quarterback, that they have one big name receiver, and then a bunch of like not great, not that they're not great, but like lower no named receivers. But then they've got a great running game, and then their defense. That's the big difference between the Bears and the Broncos. Is like you said, the Broncos seem to have a full complement of defensive players, whereas the Bears just managed to have more takeaways. But in the overall scheme of things, they aren't a great defensive team. So, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. I still harbor bad feelings against the Broncos over Super Bowl 32. So, John Elway, I was going to say John Wayne. John Elway can rot in hell for all I care. Uh, did you see something that, and I get it, they were teammates or anything, but said that Mark Schlereth or whatever his name is said that John Elway was like the best quarterback ever, and it's like no. I think I can come up with better quarterbacks
The guy who
than
was
him.
drafted after him in the same class was a better quarterback. Like, you know, Elway gets this mythos because he was the quote unquote comeback king and all that stuff. Like, but
And he wasn't the prototypical pocket passer because he could get out and move. He wasn't the greatest at it, but he could get out and move a little bit better than the prototypical pocket passer.
yeah, but Marino was the better quarterback of the guys that came out of his own draft class. Like, you know, everyone,
I'd argue Jim Kelly was even better than
oh
friggin'
yeah,
Elway.
yeah. Like Elway just has the mythos of like he's the comeback king and stuff like that, and
And he went out on a high note by going
yeah.
back to back Super Bowls, and
But
yeah,
let's
okay.
not act like he really was the driving force behind those. Those were on the back of Terrell Davis. If there
And the
is no,
defense.
yeah. But honestly, if there's no Terrell Davis in Denver, those Super Bowls don't happen. Like that's just a plain and
I
simple
don't know.
fact.
Well, yeah, they might have never made it to it, but if you're talking game on, I don't think the Falcons had a shot at all during that Super Bowl.
Oh no, the Falcons making the Super Bowl is one of those like, oh, like Cinderella story, but those
Although
don't
the
work out
highlight
in
was
the NFL.
Tim Dwight's kick return touchdown.
That's right. But
I have a soft spot, even though he's just a Hawkeye. I have a soft spot for Tim Dwight, no matter what. I know he was 5 foot nothing, 100 nothing, and he wasn't much of a. I mean, he was a good receiver. He couldn't be an NFL receiver because of his size. But my first ever Hawkeye game was in '98, and it was against Indiana, and they won like 63-0. And Tim Dwight threw for a touchdown, returned a punt for a touchdown, and caught a touchdown. And I'll remember it because it was just all over the place, and that was the year that they had like Tavian Banks at running back, and yeah, so I always have a soft spot for Tim Dwight just because that was the first ever game I ever went to in Kinnick Stadium.
gotta retroactively award him the Heisman. Like,
I'm telling you, if you go on, and I know you're a Michigan fan, so it doesn't really affect you too much to watch it since it was Iowa and Indiana. Go back. It's on. They have like the full game highlights on YouTube for that exact game. And just the way that he played was amazing.
well, I think if you look at like Michigan's '97 national championship team, the Iowa game from that season, the two scores are Tim Dwight, like one is a punt return and one is a reception or something like that. And there's newspaper clippings that are like, why are you letting him affect the game? So,
And that's why I said that. I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but Caden Weegent reminds me a shit ton of Tim Dwight. So if some team can get him, and even if it's like an undrafted thing, I would sign him in a heartbeat just to be that return specialist.
yep. So we'll see.
Okay, my tangent's over. But yeah, as for the game, I do see what you're talking about because I had the same thoughts about the Broncos being similar to the Bears. Maybe they're a lot better on than what. How do we put it against the Bears? They were what their schedule is. They're better than they're not as good as what their schedule says they are,
Yeah,
and I could see, but they do have a better defense than the Bears, so you can't. And going into Denver is always rough, so you can't say that. Yeah,
yeah. If this game was in Lambeau, I'd feel differently about it, but it's not. And Green Bay. The one good thing is that this is not a trap game. I've seen some people say like, "Is this a trap game?" I'm like, it can't be a trap game when the other team's the number one seed in its conference, kind of thing. So, what's it called? I I'm not worried about that, but you know. We'll just go through it like we usually do. We'd like to think that in week 15 we're getting into a rhythm here, but the practice report for the Packers. So the big news today: full participation in terms of roster head count, except for Josh Jacobs, who was in the building. They practiced in Hudson. Jacobs didn't participate, but was riding the bike on the side, so he was there. Honestly, I'm not surprised, given that this is his first normal week of rest since where he banged up his knee against the Giants. So, that was back in week 11. I can do math.
if anybody
Sits
doesn't see the video, Quano is actually counting on his fingers how far
so
back that was.
week 11 he bangs the knee on the MetLife turf. Week 12 he sits out against the Vikings. So he has 14 or not 14. He has 10 days between the Giants game and the Thanksgiving day, and then he takes another 10 days off between that game and the Bears game because the Lions game was on Thanksgiving. And so I'm not surprised that they're going to give him some time off, because this is like the first time he doesn't have extended rest between the games and stuff. So no real surprise there. Limited participants. It's again a long list. We'll start with just the three guys who are still on designated to return: Brenton Cox, Marshawn Lloyd, Colin Oliver, all limited participants. As far as the guys on the roster, Javon Bullard with the ankle, Kingsley Ngbari with the knee, Matthew Golden with the wrist, excuse me, Jaden Reed with the shoulder, Jordan Riley with the knee. Welcome to Green Bay, Jordan Riley. Zach Tom still listed with the back. Lucas Van Ness, welcome back to you to practice with the foot. Christian Welch working his way through concussion protocol, so he'll be limited all week, I assume. Dontavian Wicks with the ankle, and Savion with the foot. So everyone and Jordan Love was a full participant with the shoulder. Two key names.
I'm surprised with the full participant, they're still listing him on.
I think that just goes back to our whole, they're just over reporting because of what's happened around the league this season. Also, I don't know if you saw it. I did go back. Terrence Parsons noted that he grabbed Jordan's shoulder like to celebrate after the game, and Jordan's like, "Bro, my shoulder still hurts." And Terrence was like, "Oh dang!" So
if something happens in this game, we know who to blame.
Yeah, exactly. So luckily, Jordan seems to be on the mend. And then I was going to say two key names who are not listed on this report are linebackers Quay Walker and Edge Cooper. So Quay missed a couple games with the stinger. Edge left the Detroit game with the stinger. And especially with Edge, because it looked like he dinged up that shoulder again at one point during the Bears game. I think it was either in the late third or early fourth quarter. But good to see that neither of them are being listed. And
well, we're lucky Edge doesn't have a concussion.
Yeah, just some chip paint off his helmet.
But
yeah. So that's the list for the Packers. Again, the ones to really watch there, obviously, if any of the three guys designated to return come back, obviously Josh needs to be monitored, but I do think that he'll be back. As long as he's back for practice on Thursday and or Friday, he's going to play come Sunday. The two to watch in terms of if they can get upgraded are Golden and Wicks, because they're the ones that, they had no injury or Wicks had no he had no pregame designation, and he only plays 6 snaps, and LaFleur basically admitted the ankle was not as good as we hoped it would be. who knows how much of that is them just being extra precautious because you got Reed back, you had enough productive bodies kind of thing, or if it is like a Lucas thing where it's not necessarily a setback, but it's just like, oh, he didn't feel as great as he thought he did kind of thing. And then the golden one,
Shoes on it, we
some
wouldn't have
people
that
are,
problem.
and the golden one, some people are still belly aching over it, but I think it just shows like LaFleur is starting to tighten down his rotations, and as they get back more, they're more veteran guys. They're like, Matthew, we've seen some flashes, but we've also seen a bunch of rookie moments, and it's like we still want to involve you, we want to get you in there and stuff, but when you're in there, you can't be making mental mistakes, kind of thing and stuff. The interception's not on him. That's on Jordan. I'm not saying he had any mess ups this week, but there have been moments this season where you're kind of watching the film and you're like, he shouldn't be there. Like the long
And
catch
that could
against
be part of him not knowing what Jordan's checking in and out of quite yet.
right. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of reasons. And I'm not chalking it up to like he's dumb, he can't learn the playbook. We've heard how difficult this playbook is to pick up. The play calls are really long. They're often sending in two plays. So you're getting two like really long play names, and like each word in it means a different thing for the play. And then it's like, oh, like, wait, what? Like, and one word you think me, and he thinks he's running a post and it's a corner or something like that. So I'm not concerned. These are the kind of things where we saw this Jordan's first year, where it's like, does Jordan look as bad as he is? And LaFleur basically flat out said, like, Jordan has things to improve on, but people aren't helping him. It's like as kindly as he said, like, we're lacking in people being where they're supposed to be. So same thing
Well,
with
with Golden, also, what do you use when you catch a ball, right?
right, yeah, and then there's the wrist on top of it. So
Well,
yeah,
yeah, but I mean, you catch the ball with your hands, and if your wrist isn't in full mobility, how do you grip things? I,
yep,
I so
yeah.
I think that's more it than anything else.
Yeah. That's why I do laugh. Like I kind of laughed about it before the Detroit game. That everyone's like, he looks good warming up, but I'm like, route running isn't gonna show you how the wrist is feeling. Kind of
Right?
thing.
Was he doing cartwheels? That would tell you a
Yeah,
little bit more than
yeah.
anything.
If he goes from a double cartwheel into a backflip, then I'll be impressed. But until then, like, and and then the other big one, like I said, is Lucas getting back on the field. We'll see. We'll see if they push to see if they can get him in Denver. The sooner they can get him back, the better. But I do wonder if they'll play it extra cautious and try to ramp him up for that Chicago game, because I think they really need his edge setting and pass rush ability, especially from the interior against Chicago. So I think they'll play it really tentatively this week, but it would be really great to have him against Denver. But that said, like, I do think the aim is to get him back for that Chicago game.
It's all possible. I think it's you know I've we're not doctors by any means,
We're not
so
insiders either. We're going off a lot of conjecture, and yeah,
right. But what I was going to say is we've guessed that it possibly is like plantar fasciitis for him, and as we've said before, as people who have dealt with shit like that, getting old sucks, and you feel those pains and that, and there's days that it can feel good and there's days that it can feel bad, and maybe he's having a little bit more bad days than good, and there's nothing they can really do for that except rest. And I would hope, being in Denver is what's the hard thing about it, because of the altitude, and injuries tend to go weird in those situations, because you're used to a certain altitude, and then you go into a different one, and now things are feeling a lot different than
your blood
they
flow is
were.
different and all that kind of stuff
Yeah.
too. Yeah. So
So I mean, as much as I would like to see him play, I'm not interested in rushing him. I do kind of think that now that they've brought in those two big bodies, that helps out the pass rush a little bit more, because now they can eat up some doubles and that, and allow the other guys to get there. The one that I'm kind of curious about is Brenton Cox, and if he's ready to come back, that should give an extra juice because he's similar. He's Let me put it this way: he's not the same player as Micah, but he's similar where he uses more speed than anything. And I think if you can get two speed guys opposite each other, it's going to help out a little bit more because the downside about Rashawn is he's not quite speed; he's more power. And Lucas is kind of a mixture of both, where he can be speed and power. But what you need is and that's why I said even Colin Oliver would be an interesting one to throw in there because if you can get two speed edge guys coming at him, it's a little bit more disruptive than just a couple of pure strength edges.
Yeah, that's why like people are getting all upset about like quick pass rush wins and all that kind of stuff, and I'm like, that's not all these guys' games. Like Micah is by far and away leading this team in it because he is your guy. Like you just eloquently put it. He is your guy for that. So, you know, obviously I want all these guys to do more, but you know what? They've been really effective with what they're doing. Yes, everyone could always pull a little more water, but that like I said, the thing similar to the Bears game, little different because like we've both mentioned, Denver's defense is legit, whereas the Bears is just
Weird.
inconceivably held together by cotton swabs and scotch tape. But
Well, like I said, weird because they have a ton of turnovers, but their production wise, they're not great. So
yeah,
it's weird.
but yeah, this is gonna be a game. Like I said, this game is gonna test the Packers because and honestly, I like that they have this test. Obviously, I want them to win out and have a chance at the number one seed, lock up the North, and all that kind of stuff. End up with the highest seed you can get. But this is a really important test for the Packers because they looked like they were getting into an offensive groove, and then you lose Tucker Kraft in the Carolina game. You really scuffle around, and you know. It's like a Dudley Do Right sketch where you're riding the moose backwards and your pants are falling down kind of thing. And then it looks like you regained your composure and your skill over the following 4 weeks. You beat New York, you come back to beat New York, and then you have the 3 game sweep of the division games. And now you're gonna face what's probably the best defense that's on your schedule, that's guaranteed to be on your schedule all season. And these are the kind of benchmark tests that I really like for any team that's, posturing itself for postseason play. Obviously, I want the Packers to win this game, but this is one where I think it's a really good test for all parties involved on the Packers, both from a player's perspective, a coaching perspective. You know, there's a lot that can be gained from this one, but obviously, I want to see the Packers win this one because, like I said, for all the playoff seeding implications, and like you said at the top, fuck the Broncos, but matchup wise, the center, for the Packers offense against the Broncos, excuse me, defense, the centerpiece of this defense is what Pat Surtain the second does in the secondary. I'm really curious to see if who he's going to match on. Do they put him on Watson? I think they will and probably should. And it'll be really interesting to see if Watson can get a couple on Surtain. Um, but it's one of those curious matchups because Sertan's thing is being ultra physical with wide receivers, and at the same time, he's a really good athlete, but he's not an alien athlete like Watson is. And so, from that sense, you'd like to see Watson beat him deep or on a dig and stuff. And at the same time, Love can't get caught waiting for that to happen. You know what I mean? Like he has to still keep within the structure of all the plays. He can't be like, I'm going to give Christian every option because that's how you get into sack situations with this defense, especially because they can create quick pressure. Bonito will scream off the edge, and he'll be starting. I really expect that he'll be starting across from Rashid Walker. And Rashid's going to have to play a really good game this week. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. they're going to need his best game. And Rashid's had hit kind of a slump late in the season, and for the Packers' playoff pursuit and for Rashid's own personal pursuit of free agency, he needs a bounce back, and no better time for him to start one than against the Broncos. Like I said, Sertan is like the centerpiece of this defense. Up front, they have one of the most old reliable players in Zach Allen, who has asserted himself as one of the best 5 techniques in the league. John Franklin Myers, I believe, what's it called? He has been around Denver for the past only 2 years, but he was a key piece on those Jets defenses in the early. Oh fudge, what's his name? Uh, the Niners defensive coordinator. Why am I Salah? Yeah, Salah's defenses, and just 2 really good 5 techniques for this defense. And but they're able to. They like to blitz. They like to play a lot of man coverage. And the Packers are going to just have to beat that. It's like I said, it's really good that Watson and Reed are, Watson is healthy. Reed is getting himself in game shape. And, we saw them draw up a lot of stuff for Reed last week. But if there's any week to get Wicks and Golden healthy, this is it, because you need as many of your guys who can separate in man coverage. I think the trick for the Packers is you have to attack downfield. You can't get caught trying to just throw screens and quick routes, because the Broncos are really good at closing and tackling on those kind of things. One point of weakness is someone you're familiar with. Riley Moss is one of the most targeted, mainly because he's the other guy from Patrick Surtain II, but also because he has a propensity for getting called for DPI or illegal contact. So, like, Denver is like first or second in wide receiver 1 coverage, top 5 to 10 in slot receiver coverage, but they're like bottom third against number 2 receivers, i.e., whoever Moss is covering. So that'll be an interesting thing to see how Denver approaches. Like I said, do they just isolate Surtain on Watson, or do they kind of roll the dice and say, like, we'll just give extra support and we're going to have Surtain just completely eliminate someone else from the play kind of thing. But that's also a key to, like I said earlier, we got to see this run game happen, because if this reshuffled Packers offensive line another week together can just continue to flex their muscle and create movement in the ground game, that's going to be their best option in terms of getting traction in this game, because I know Denver has good stats against the run, but they haven't been quite as stout the past few weeks against the run. They're not leaky by any stretch of the imagination, but we've seen, like, I keep wanting to call them the Redskins. We've seen the Commanders have some success against them. I'm not gonna put any sort of what's it called, congratulations on beating up on the Raiders, but I do just think that Green Bay could find some success on the ground if they're able to get their O-line rolling. But in terms of the offense, the Packers offense, Denver defense, what are you looking for, Joe?
Well, I was just kind of looking at this real quick. I think a lot of it for Riley does have to do with the fact that nobody's throwing at Surtain. So that's the key there. But I think you pretty much covered it. If Surtain is just going to trail Watson, then you're going to have to open it up to your other guys. You're not going to be able to force anything in there. Hit your shots when you can get them. Think of the Packers versus Patriots when it was Jordy versus Darrelle Revis. Everybody was really afraid about that one because, Darrelle was having like a career year or whatever it was, and Jordy tore him up. Well, that's because they were able to get him open to make plays on that. If you can do that with Watson, do it, but don't rely on that. Use a Reed, use a Romeo, use a Wicks if he's healthy, use a Golden if he's healthy. Throw Bo Melton in there if you have to, whatever you do. But this would be the perfect game LaFleur loved to get into that. We're going to spread the ball around to everybody, and because Sertan is a legit corner, and it, I hate bashing a Hawkeye alum, but he is getting beat up because he is constantly getting thrown at. And like I said, it's not because he's a bad player. He's actually a solid player if you look at things. It's just when the quarterback is avoiding one whole side of the field because that's where the top corner is at and just keeps throwing at you, there's not much you can do. I mean, I, no team has ever really had two number one corners on the field at the same time. Even the Legion of Boom guys, you can't say were two
No,
number one corners on the same field at the same time.
not in the
So
salary cap era, at least. Yeah, like
yeah,
you just can't. You the closest you can get is like like in the Packers sense, it's like old Charles
Tremont and
Woodson
Sam.
and yeah, it's an old Tremont and a young Sam, or an old Charles and a young Tremont kind of thing and stuff. Like there's the vet and the up and comer kind of thing and stuff, but you don't really you just it's hard to have the resources for two of those kind of guys. So I agree. Like, and as tough sledding as the Broncos defense is gonna put things on the
Well, I
Packers.
have one more
Oh yeah,
point
go
that I
for it.
have for the Broncos defense. For as good as they look, they struggle with turnovers.
Yeah,
I just been looking at that real quick just to see what it is, and interception wise, even their top two corners have no interceptions. Moss and Sertan have no interceptions. They only have 7 interceptions total on the year, and they only have 8 forced fumbles, but they have a shit ton of pass defenses. So they're not able to turn that into interceptions. So as long as you're not doing anything stupid, i.e., the interception against the Bears, they're not going to turn it, they're not going to create turnovers. So be
I
smart
think
with them.
yeah, and I think a big factor into that is like they lead the league by a wide margin in sack production. They're at 55, and I think the next
Yeah.
nearest team is like 11 back. And so I think a function of that is that when they get pressured, they're sacking your quarterback. They're not like they're not pressuring you
Right,
into
but if you
turnovers.
look
Yeah,
at the pass defenses for all these guys, Moss has got 12, Sertan's got 11,
yeah.
Ufonga has 10, McMillan has 7, Jones has 7, Allen has 6, Barron has 4, Cooper has 4. I mean, they have, what is that combined? Let me grab that real quick. They have 75 total pass defenses for a defense. So, I mean, I get what you're saying about the pass rush, but
Yeah,
these are still guys out there that are solid, secondary. They're just struggling with creating the turnover on things.
and I think that speaks to how much man coverage they play because they're what's it called? Sertan especially is what's called a trail man coverage corner. So he's gonna I don't want to say he lets the receiver go by, but he's gonna, get even with the receiver and he's gonna play in his hip pocket so that like he's just sort of running the route with the receiver. And so he's his he's kind of in one of the like worst positions to get interceptions because basically he has to either time his turnaround properly or it has to bounce off someone else and like bounce to him kind of thing. So part of it, like you said, I think there's a lot of factors into it, but I think a big portion of it is the type of defense that they play, where they're such a heavy man coverage team. But for the first time, the Packers have most of their man beaters on the field, and like I said, the big factor is how many snaps can Jaden Reed play? How many, how healthy are Dontavian Wicks and Matthew Golden? Can you get them on for 30, 40, 50% of the plays? And this is a week where LaFleur has to all those routes he runs where there's a lot of hitches, throw those out. Like don't bother running those this week. Run all your movement routes, all your crossing routes, all that kind of stuff. Run all those plays, but throw all the other stuff out for just for a week. You can be opponent specific, especially against an uncommon opponent. The other point I was going to get to is in the sense of Denver's defense is going to make it tough on Green Bay's offense, but LaFleur and the offense have to resist the urge to feel pressured to score. Like, obviously, if you have your opportunities, you have to convert. But this is the kind of game where Denver's defense is really tough. Their offense is honestly a slog to watch, and it makes watching their games a chore because, Sean, what's his Sean Payton gets this rap for being this offensive mind, and he does still create a really good scheme and all that kind of stuff. But his this offense is so clunky and hard to watch at times, and a lot of it, just like the Bears, and like I said, there's a lot of spiritual similarities between the Bears and this Broncos team. A lot of it is due to the fact that their quarterback situation is not ideal, and I know Broncos fans, Broncos believers will tell you otherwise, but Bo Nix, not that good of a pro quarterback. He's athletic, he can move, he's I think he's more effective as a runner than he is as a passer. That's just my thinking. But I don't like how he reads defenses. It's a lot like Caleb, where you know if the initial read that Peyton tells him should be there isn't there, there are times where he's kind of like, I'm gonna break the pocket. And one of the big things they keep talking about is, oh, he's not taking sacks. He doesn't take sacks. But unlike Caleb, who's gonna run around and like chuck some amazing ball downfield, what's it called? Nix leads the league, or like almost leads the league in throwaways, like throwaway percentage. He's throwing the ball away on a sixth of all his passes, which when you say it by a sixth, it doesn't sound like that much. But when you think about like, oh, there are 30-40 pass plays in a game, and that means you're throwing what is that, like 5 to 6 of them away a game. That's a lot. So
But
just
he is still completing 63.2% of his
yeah.
passes.
So it's one of those, like I said, and it's one of those where you're kind of like, how do they make it work and stuff? But it really is on this defense just sucking the life out of opponents and allowing their offense to do the bare minimum to win these games. So the Packers just have to play, like you said, they have to be turnover averse on offense. But on defense, there should be an ability for the Packers defense to take advantage of this Broncos offense.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, for what the Broncos are sitting at right now with the games they've played, maybe the Giants game, the Texans game, definitely. They've not faced anybody like Micah this year. And I hate to keep saying that because Micah's not just the only guy on defense, but he's the game changer on defense.
Yeah.
He's the one that you have to scheme for because he's going to wreck your game plan. And I was just looking at it real quick. I don't think there's any other guys that I mean, like I said, outside of maybe Will Anderson with the Texans and
Burns, Brian
Burns
Burns.
and Thibodeau for the Giants. I don't think there's anybody that they've faced that's going to dominate like he does. So don't fall into this soft zone coverage like we keep having to friggin' talk about. Game plan it like the Bears, show a little bit more blitz to it. Bring in some guys. Don't stop the run. Basically what I'm saying, stop the run, make them try to throw.
Yep. I agree with you. And, move some of your pieces around. Let Rashawn, especially if Lucas doesn't come back this week, let Rashawn rush as a 3 technique. Let him be the guy that Micah is rushing off the backside of on third and passing down situations.
And weather-wise, it should be a decent game. I just was looking at it. It's 63 a high and 39 for a low, and no precipitation.
Yeah, relatively clear-ish skies for this time of year and stuff. So, yeah, like I said, you can't press if you're the Packers, but you do have to take. I mean, I know people are going to say great game plan, Mike, but it really is going to be one of those end every drive in a kick kind of games because this offense struggles enough that you don't want to give them any freebies, and defensively, just turn this into a Bo Nix has to beat us kind of game. I know that he has the highlights of it, like his touchdown run against the Raiders and stuff. That's the Raiders, like, and when they have faced good defenses, I'm not even gonna say the elite because like the Texans game, and that was a game where Houston honestly blew that one at the end. But anytime they faced a tough defense, the Chargers, the Colts at the time of the year, the Eagles, this offense has absolutely struggled to put up points. So Green Bay's defense, just keep doing what you're doing, and Green Bay's offense, if you can put up 28 points in this game, which is going to be tough, you're going to feel really good about your opportunity to win this one. Nix isn't turning the ball over like he was last year, but I always say when you have this kind of player, the guy he was at Auburn is still in there somewhere. And, he's gotten better at avoiding sacks and negative plays and all that kind of stuff. But his avenue for doing that is not the same. He doesn't have the same escapability as a Caleb Williams, where like he's gonna totally run away from all your defensive. He's a good athlete, but he's not gonna completely run away from your defense like Caleb could from everyone but Parsons and maybe Javon Bullard and maybe Edge or Quay. So like you've got to take advantage of that, push him to desired locations within and outside the pocket, and like you said, just tighten up your coverage a little bit. What'll help in that area is there's been reports that Patrick Bryant, who has elevated himself to their second wide receiver, he is expected to miss the game with a hamstring injury. So that takes out a weapon for Knicks to utilize. And this offense was really clunky before Bryant asserted himself as the second receiver on the team. So um, that'll be
Sean
really
Payton's
important.
own fault. He's got a decent wide receiver over there, but for some reason he does not use him. I think it boggles everybody's mind why he doesn't use Marvin Mims like he should be.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it now that Mims is averaging under 10 yards of reception, which is wild. And Mims looked like he was on his way to potential stardom back in 2023 and was a draft darling and stuff. And yeah, it's like, and it's funny because Peyton has, you look at his time not St. Louis, in New Orleans, and he always had this soft spot for those smaller, speedy wide receivers, like Brandon Cooks or like a Lance Moore even and stuff like that. Like he always had these like little shorter, fast receivers. And for whatever reason, Mims started off hot in his career and then has just completely tailed off the past couple seasons. So, you know, good. Don't use the speed guy against us. Like that's fine by me. But anyone else that catches your eye in this game?
I mean, Nick still will give up some because he's already thrown 9 interceptions on the season, so he does have the. I mean, there is potential there. Sutton, RJ Harvey, we've already talked about the run game. Harvey is electric. Shout out Sarah Kelleher because that's a fellow
Used to,
alum there. But Harvey was kind of a draft crush of mine coming into this year. They they don't have well. You got to be careful with their tight ends. They have Evan Ingram, who is kind of what you would hope Lucas Musgrave could become. Not going to be a blocker, but is going to be the seam guy that you have to. He's a mismatch, and then you've got Troutman. Do you remember where Troutman came from? Is he the
yes,
UNI guy? Northern
oh,
Iowa.
yes, yeah.
Okay.
I thought you were being where he spent some time in his career.
No. I was trying to remember if what school he went to.
He went to Dayton, it says.
Okay. Okay, because there was one that was drafted from out of northern Iowa, and I think it was that same year that Troutman did,
Yeah, but yeah. So,
and I couldn't
but
remember if that was the guy or not, but I remember him kind of being like a late riser in the draft process that year,
yeah,
and so I mean he's got a little bit to him, but Ingram is going to be the more matchup that you have to watch out for just
he's
because of
got the
what he
home
will
run
bring.
speed. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, other than that, no, I really don't have. Like I said, if they would all of a sudden start using Marvin Mims for some reason, that would be scary. But otherwise, I'm not really overly scared on a lot of their guys. Uh, shit, hit the wrong one. Franklin, Bryant's it's not going to play. And, little Jordan Humphrey isn't going to scare me at all. So, yeah, there's not much there outside of Cortland. I mean, they have guys, but it's not like you have to game plan for those guys. So,
I think the big
again,
thing with Sutton at this point, he's still a really good receiver. The big concern you would have is like he's a big body who knows he's a big body. And
right.
you always kind of like, especially with our DBs, it's like, okay, like who's gonna do what kind of thing. So yeah. But other than that, I don't really have too much more. I feel like we'll just be going, barking up the same trees and stuff. So I'm ready to get into over unders if you are at this point.
Yeah, just a second. We forgot to hit the button earlier.
Never tell me
Ah.
the odds.
Now my page just went away. Here it is. Uh, so, like I've said for the last couple weeks, these are just probably going to be similar for the next few weeks anyway. But so my first one I've got over under Jordan Love 1.5 touchdowns. I set it at this because the last few games that's been his target is 2 touchdowns or a minimum of two. So yeah, over under 1.5 for him.
I'm going under. I think he'll have one passing, but I just think that this is going to be I think that this is going to be a grinded out kind of game, and it's going to be Jacobs diving in from like short yardage kind of game. Like Jacobs might end up with two kind of thing and stuff.
I'm going to say over just because I think it is going to end up two, but I think one of them is going to be a receiver and the other one's going to be like on a Josh Jacobs screen.
Mm.
And so that's where I'm setting on that one. What do I got for the next one? Over under Micah 1.5 sacks.
Under for the reverse jinx.
Well, he got shut out against the Bears, although he put up a shit ton of pressures. I'm gonna say he gets his revenge on that, and he does get his two. The last one I got is over under Watson 1.5 touchdowns because again the last two games he's come up with 2 touchdowns. So
I've got the under on this one purely because I've got Jordan only throwing for one. And like I said, because of who's I expect Denver to cover Watson, I don't think he's going to have a great impact in this game just because I do think that while Watson has the athleticism advantage and he has improved as a route runner, Sertan is just, in terms of his coverage skills against Watson's route running capabilities, Sertan has the advantage there. Now, if the Packers O line is going to, have a dominant day up front and or their run game really sets things up for the play action pass game, all bets are off at that point. But I do this thing, like I said, this is more on the backs of I have Love only for one touchdown.
well, I'm gonna take the under with it too, just because like I said, if Love gets one to him and then one to Jacobs, then obviously he doesn't have the 2 touchdowns. So I got the under on that, but I'm also again, like I said earlier, I'm hoping this becomes a game where Jordan will spread the ball around to more
Yeah,
people.
I think you have to have this be one of those games because, like I said, you just have to expect that Sertan is going to eliminate whoever he's covering on a given play. And therefore, and like, look, Denver has a bunch of names on their defense, but they're names that at this part of their careers you should be able to take advantage of. It is a bummer not having Tucker, but if you have the chance to have to have Musgrave running seam routes against Dre Greenlaw or Alex Singleton in coverage, you got to take advantage of that opportunity. And I like Luke's chances against that. Luke was having a solid game against the Broncos the last time he played in they played in Denver in 2023, and luckily, Kareem Jackson no longer plays for the Broncos, so Musgrave doesn't have to worry about getting potentially concussed or have his ankle rolled after he gets potentially concussed by a dirty hit from Jackson. So obviously, he has to watch out for Hafunga, who is a similar player in that vein, or Hufanga, who is a similar player in that vein. But I think this is a game where Musgrave he's my sleeper for like having one of his patented 2 catches, 46-yard kind of games, because he just gets up the seam on Denver and just kind of like, that's the thing, like I said, is you can't get caught up trying to keep everything short because Denver's too good for that. You do have to still find ways to push the balls into the intermediate and deep zones of the field and take advantage of your opportunities there. And I do think that Musgrave up the seam is an opportunity for the Packers here. I will throw one on here. We got to do it for the brand. Is this the magic week for Matthew Golden?
I'm going to keep saying yes until I can't anymore, just because I do believe in the kid. And it's not just because I go back to that I made the prediction and got it right. I think he is that special that he can do it. I did talk. I was talking to somebody about Matthew Golden last week, and I said, with as many guys as they have on the roster, they're just slow rolling him. They're not gonna. They don't have to force him out there to be
Yeah.
the playmaker week one. And so if they, and plus again, I go back to, what do you got to use when you catch the ball? You use your hands. Well, what are your hands connected to? Your wrist. Well, if you can't move your wrist, you can't move your hand. So if he's hurt, he's hurt. But I still am kind of pissed off seeing that somebody put out there, well, is Matthew Golden a bust? Well, fuck you. And there, you can't judge a guy. It's not like a Jamarcus Russell where, you know, you can see bust written all over him just because of his attitude and
Yeah.
his shit like that. It takes a little bit longer than that. And I have to laugh. And I can't pronounce his name for nothing, but everybody wanted the kid from Ohio State.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's fallen
it,
off in a bad way as the season is.
terribly.
Yeah.
So,
Basically, once the Baker MVP talk ended, so did Buka's Rookie of the Year talk too. That fell off a cliff as well. So yeah, I agree. Like, he was getting, I don't want to say he was getting force fed opportunities, but he had way more of a direct path to receptions and targets and stuff. And Golden's learning a much more sophisticated offense in terms of both the play call and what's expected out of the receivers. He was being groomed for a role that the team needed him to do more than it was the one that fit him best, so to speak. But at the same time, despite all those things, all season he's gotten open. When they've thrown him the ball, he's caught it when he's had the opportunity to catch it. And I don't believe he has a drop to his record. And knock on wood, I do not believe he has or
I
one
think
drop.
he's got one or two.
Yeah, I'm trying to think which ones those are, but to whatever, like it's a very low number. And but yeah, like I it is more a matter of opportunity than like he is failing the team. Like you said, circumstances have been the way they are, and I just don't think they've needed him to be that guy yet, kind of thing. And it's just a numbers game and stuff. But I'm gonna say no, just because I'm, just like with the Micah Sacks thing. I've put my heels in the ground, and I'm gonna stay that way until the status quo changes. But like you, I'm rooting for him. Like, it's gonna happen. People need to stop being stupid about the dumbest things and stuff. But yeah,
So
Yeah.
according to Pro Football Reference, he's got 24 catches on 33 targets, and I know at least most of those targets are like overshots or whatever.
Yeah.
And and there's a couple of, you can call them drops on the two deep shots that they tried to take to him because it bounced off his hands on both of them. But I know there was one other one, and I can't remember the game off the top of my head. But he like bobbled it, and it went out, and yeah, I do remember one specifically. I just can't remember what
Mm,
game it was with.
okay. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't deem the ones against Washington drops because the one Amos broke it up, and then the other one that was like a fingertip reach out to try and grab it kind of one and
I
stuff.
think it
But
was Carolina. I'd have to go back and look. I think there was one against
I
Carolina
think you're
where
right. I think you're right. I think that is the one. But either way, the best is yet to come for Golden, and I highlight him because if he's healthy, this is the week you need his skill set because, like I said, it's a heavy man coverage team, and also, he hasn't been able to show it yet, but he is a yak production guy because he can stick his foot in the ground off a catch and make a cut and get upfield. So you need all of
the
that.
thing that I would love for them to do if he's healthy and can play, and you know for certain Sertan is going to be on Watson, I'd send Golden deep.
Yep.
I know Riley has some speed to him, but he does not have Matthew Golden speed, and I'd send him deep. First shot, let him go.
Yep. But that's going to do it for us tonight. We'll have your post game, as Joe and I were joking about before. I did, we're because of what time slot this game is in. We are more than likely, unless something happens, going live for the post game show. And because of the way the schedule has shaken out, there's a high chance that we are going live for every post game recap the rest of the way, pending whatever the league decides to do with the Week 18 game against the Vikings. But we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, this game's recap will be a live show. So please check out the website, ohanapackers.org. Support us there through the shop. Check out articles. Struggling to come up with a topic this week, but I will come up with something. Post something tomorrow to get up for all of you to look at. I am trying to put 2 articles up a week just to keep content going in on the site. So check us out over there. Please follow the podcast on your social medias at Ohana_Packers on Twitter, at Ohana Packers Edition on Instagram. Please follow Ohana Packers Edition on Facebook. As I noted, we're going to a lot of live streams, and if we can get our follower count on Facebook up, we're going to be able to live stream to that account as well. Please follow the podcast on your favorite podcasting apps. Please give us a like and a subscribe. I'll try to be better about it too, but Joe's really good about putting out questions or comment requests as the game is going for us to go over in the post game. I'll try to do my best to be on top of that as well from my point. But until then, the Packers are heading to strengthen their postseason rumble, get the vibes good. It just prove that they are the contenders they want to be, and this test in Mile High is a big one. So for all of us, go Pack, go, and aloha.
Green Bay hustle, grind it up. Hit the field, we don't bluff. Touchdown dances, feel the love. Jordan's got that MVP stuff. It's time for Ohio. Let's go. Packers bringing that show. It's time for you know who. Wanna go.